Hey guys, today we're going to do a prime rib on the Weber Kettle. We're going to smoke it and sear it. You're going to love it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Todd. This is Greenhorn Barbecue and Beer. This is the channel that takes you on barbecue crawls, introduces you to tasty backyard barbecue recipes, and occasionally we get a sassy kitchen queen in here and we do some beautiful kitchen cooks and all kinds of tasty treats. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap that bell so you don't miss a thing. So what we have here is a 9.5 pound beautiful piece of prime rib, standing rib roast. It's a choice grade by the USDA, but it is known as a prime rib because it's from the primal portion of the cow or the meat. And as you can see, the marbling looks beautiful. I'm not sure what their grade is on choice, but I think this is a higher grade of choice, probably close to being prime, because I really saw a lot of marbling. The fat cap looked beautiful. I didn't trim a thing. I just left it alone. Now, the reason they call it a standing rib roast is so that they cut the bone in a certain way to where you can keep the meat out of the pan and it's standing on the ribs. So we're essentially going to do the same thing but on the Weber. So this isn't a video about the things you must have in order to cook a good prime rib on the Weber. Obviously you need a Weber Kettle if you're going to do this way, or any kind of charcoal grill will work. But what I'm going to show you here is just a few of the methods that I used to come out with a really delicious rib roast. So I chose to cook it this way because it was a cold, kind of a damp day. I didn't want to get the Yoder Wichita out and set it up and spend all that time heating the Yoder up and then managing the wood. I wanted to cook right at my back porch, so I decided to use the Weber. It's a great alternative to the Traeger. With a little bit of practice, you can really get it right, and you can almost cook anything on a Weber kettle. So since these are essentially a whole bunch of ribeye steaks that are still connected and it still has the bone in there, what you're going to want to do is tie them up with some good butcher's twine. Any good kitchen is going to have a roll of this stuff. You can pick it up almost anywhere, but make sure it's a butcher's twine and it's food grade. It doesn't need to be coated with any kind of chemicals or any wax or anything like that. So I decided to tie mine right between the bones, right where it looks like it'll probably fall apart the most. You want to protect the spinalis and the other parts of the meat from pulling away during the cook and getting too fat. And if you don't have a good set of kitchen shears, be sure to grab yourself some. The set that I'm using, I've shown in previous cooks, and I'll drop a link down in the description to them. They're Terada kitchen shears. They're very inexpensive, but they're very durable and they're great for a kitchen. I'll also drop a link to the butcher's twine so that you don't miss a thing. So I didn't use any kind of special kind of knot or anything to tie these up. I know that there's some special knots out there, but I didn't take time to go learn a butcher's knot or any kind of thing. I did 20 years in the Navy and I still don't know how to tie more than 2 or 3 kinds of knots. Whatever works for you, tie it off, make sure it's nice and snug, and then move on. So once I tied off the rib roast, it was time for seasoning it up. So I used this Bocafina flavor made simple that I got for Christmas. Thanks, Sean. It turned out to be a really, really delicious rub. It produced a beautiful bark, and it had an amazing color afterwards. The only thing I would have added, and what I'll probably add next time I use this seasoning, is a little bit more salt. But that's more of a season to taste kind of issue right there. It's great just by itself. I really recommend it, and I'll drop a link down below to Flavor Made Simple so you can go check it out yourself. This is the first rib roast, prime rib, that I've done on the Weber Kettle, and I didn't want to mess it up. I wanted to make sure I got it right. So, of course, YouTube to the rescue, and I was searching around. I really didn't have any particular preference on someone's channel, but I found Cooking with Rye's video on cooking a prime rib on his Weber Kettle, and I found it to be a really simple, really easy method to use. So shout out to Cooking with Rye, and I'll drop a link to his channel down below just so I'm crediting him properly. And of course, we're going to put our own Greenhorn Barbecue Beer spin on it. So once I was done seasoning everything up, it was time to probe it with the meter. I've used these before. I'll drop a link in the description down where you could find it. At the website, there's an app you could download. It's got a lot of different functions. You could set different alarms, different temperature zones, and It's a really awesome thing to have. There are different manufacturers and different styles. Choose your own. The meter probe was the one that I bought first, so it's my preference. So the only thing left to do, well, we got a lot to do, but the next thing to do is to set up your Weber kettle. So I'm using the Weber Kettle 22 Performer that I picked up last year. I'll drop a link to the review that I did on this. If you know Webers, you know that they're extremely efficient, extremely versatile, and no backyard kit should be without one. So what I decided to use here to get the offset charcoal and wood off to one side of the kettle is from Adrenaline Barbecue Company, the Slow and Sear. It's a stainless steel, very heavy gauge charcoal basket, and has an integrated water pan, and it's very sturdy. It fits right up under the grates, under the brackets, inside the kettle, and it's a fantastic thing to have as part of a Weber accessory kit. Now, Weber has its own charcoal baskets, and they're excellent. I'm not discounting them at all, but for this particular cook, I wanted to show you the Slow and Sear from Adrenaline Barbecue Company. So I had some leftover charcoal from a previous cook, and if you don't know already, after you get done cooking on any kind of charcoal grill, when you are done with the cook, you can shut down your grill, and that charcoal will go out, and then you could shake it and reuse that charcoal in a later cook. Off over to the other corner, I started a little pile of charcoal. Now, to get it lit, I decided to use a little product known as a tumbleweed. Basically, I just shoved it into the corner, put a couple briquettes over it, lit it, and gave it time to catch up. So on the cooking side of the chamber, I've put a drip pan right below where the meat's going to go. So what I'll also be using today is some hickory chunks for the smoke. Now these chunks are cut into about 6-inch pieces. They're thin, just right for a Weber kettle. You can use smaller wood shavings if you want. There's all kinds of products to use, little baskets to put them in, or boxes and things. I chose just real wood chunks, and I'm going to be putting it right on the charcoal. And then once they catch fire and begin to coal up, then I'll put the lid on and finish the smoking. The only thing I have left to do next is place the meat onto the main cooking grate. Now the cooking grate I have has either edge has got a hinge so that you can add more wood or charcoal to your basket, the Slow and Sear, throughout the cook. I'm going to be going for at least a 4-hour cook, I know, in order to get this prime rib roast done. So this is the part where the standing rib roast gets its name. I'm going to place the meat bone side toward the fire basket, bone down, fat side up, and essentially that is why it's called a standing rib roast. It's basically the bones are standing on its own, keeping the meat out of any kind of pan that you might be using. In this case, I'm only using a drip pan, but I'm using the fat side up and bone toward the fire to help protect the main piece of meat, the eye of the rib roast. So I'm going to be setting the kettle at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to be using that hickory wood. I'm going to be doing this temperature for at least the first couple of hours until I know that the rib roast has got plenty of smoke and obtained the color that I'm looking for. So then once I figure that it's probably got all the smoke that it could take, I'm going to open up the vents a little bit more, and I'm going to increase the temperature to about 350 degrees. And this is going to get its nice exterior sear going. It's going to give a nice dark color that I'm looking for, nice dark mahogany. And as you can see, as the fat kind of pulls back, you can kind of see some of that color that we're getting on the outside. That's a combination of the seasoning and the wood and the great effect that you get from a Weber kettle. So a good little tip for you, as you're adding hickory chunks, don't take the lid totally off. Pull the lid slightly back and just to expose the Slow and Sear basket. And since the cooking grate has a hinge on it, you can open it up and drop chunks of wood right there. Give them a chance to flame up a little bit, and then once they start to coal up, then slide that lid back on, and make sure you leave the exhaust vent of the hood right above the meat. And this way you get a nice flow of smoke and heat coming from the bottom of the kettle over your meat right to the exhaust. Okay, so during this whole process, I'm watching my meter app on my phone very carefully. I'm looking for fairly even temperature. On the green line, you could see almost every time I slid the kettle lid back to add wood, I had a little dip like a little valley in the temperature. And then when I put the lid back on, it went back up. So you'll get those kind of readings over time, and that's okay. The magenta curve at the bottom is the one you really should be most concerned about over a long cook, and that's basically showing a gradual increase of the internal temperature of your meat. You don't want to see dips and valleys there or any leveling off, because that's where the meat will get screwed up. So using my meter app, I targeted 130 degrees internal temperature, and I monitored this throughout the cook. Now with the meter app on your phone, you could set alarms to give you an alarm on your phone every 5 degrees increase or 5 degrees from your desired temperature. It automatically provides a cook duration time, basically an estimate of how long it thinks it'll take to reach that target temperature that you set based on ambient and internal temperature and how it's measuring that increase. So that's a really handy thing to have. So it gives you another alarm automatically as a default 5 minutes from the end of the cook. So I think that's a fantastic feature that you should definitely look at. So I decided to pull it off just shy of 130. I took it off at about 127. We brought it inside, put it in a pan, and we lightly tented it with foil, not too tight. We want it to still breathe a little bit, but we know that it's still coasting up. It's still increasing in temperature, and it may go up about another 5 degrees. So we just let it rest, had another cocktail, and waited until it reached our target temperature. So once it reaches your target temperature, in this case, right about 133 degrees or so, I was looking for a nice medium rare to medium, knowing that the ends are going to be more of a well, and that's what the Sassy Kitchen Queen likes. So you take a nice long serrated knife, and what I like to do is separate the bone first. So I put it up on end, and but in this case I kind of screwed up, and I made a right turn instead of a left turn. I ended up cutting some of the fat tail off more than I wanted to, but that's okay. It ended up making some really juicy ribs in the long run. So as you can see, it came out beautiful. It was just a gorgeous piece of meat. The fat on the outside rendered beautifully. Some of the fat on the inside was on the verge of turning into a jelly and rendering down. It just came out really beautiful. There was a slight hint of smokiness to it. It was really nice. The seasoning from Flavor Made Simple tasted great on the outside. Again, I would have added maybe a little bit more salt to it, and that's our preference, but otherwise it tasted really great. But as you can see, overall, it came out great. It's proof that on a Weber Kettle you can cook anything, especially a prime rib. Take a chance, get out in the backyard, try this recipe out. And again, kudos to Cooking with Rye. This is the channel that got me motivated to try this on the Weber. Otherwise, I would have been stuck inside cooking from the oven, and we all know how that turns out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to tap that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing. And we'll see you on the next cook. And Happy New Year.